Jordan.
She took her son to the school fundraiser, only to see his billionaire father arrive with his new wife and newborn. The first thing you notice about Harborview Community Center isn't the building itself, it's the sound. Jazz notes float through the evening air, slightly off rhythm, as if the trio's bassist keeps forgetting they're performing for charity, not a dive bar in Queens. Paper lanterns bob overhead, their warm glow catching glitter smeared across children's cheeks, remnants of the face-painting booth that ran out of unicorns an hour ago. At 6:42 p.m. on November 3rd, everything shifts. But wait, before we get there, let me tell you about the most explosive family collision to hit Seattle's elite since the tech boom went bust. This story involves a billionaire who built an empire on calculated risks, a woman who raised a child alone while watching that empire grow from newspaper headlines, and the moment when past decisions demanded their due. If you're fascinated by how power, money, and buried secrets shape the families who seem to have everything, you need to hear what happened at this fundraiser. Hit that subscribe button right now, because we're about to explore a confrontation years in the making. Drop a comment telling us what you'd do if you suddenly faced the father who never knew you existed. And ring that notification bell. Trust me, you won't want to miss how this unfolds. The pearl grey Mercedes S-Class pulls up to the curb at exactly the wrong moment, or perhaps exactly the right one depending on your perspective. Lena Cho steps out first, her publicist instincts scanning the crowd like a Secret Service agent checking exits. She counts the photographers, 3, notes the local news van from Channel 7, and calculates optimal photo angles before nodding to her clients. Sloane Mercer Lockwood emerges with practiced grace, her cream cashmere wrap arranged to frame baby Aurora's face just so. The infant, barely 6 weeks old, wears a knit cap that probably cost more than most people's car payments. Sloane's smile arrives precisely on cue, warm enough for voters, cool enough for rivals, calibrated to the millimeter. Then Gage Lockwood unfolds from the driver's side, even exhausted, and the shadows under his eyes suggest Aurora keeps banker's hours crying from 2 to 5 a.m. He commands attention. His charcoal suit fits the way expensive things do, like armor made of wool. He reaches for Sloane's elbow, a gesture both protective and possessive, and they move toward the entrance as a unit. The Lockwood brand in motion, powerful, polished, untouchable. The crowd parts. Parents tug children closer, creating a natural corridor. Someone's grandmother whispers to her friend about that shipping fortune loud enough for everyone to hear. A teenager raises her phone, angling for the perfect TikTok moment. Near the cotton candy station, Jordan Carter doesn't move. She stands with her 11-year-old son Orion, whose science fair project on sustainable energy had earned them both invitations to tonight's Green Initiative fundraiser. She dressed carefully, her navy dress professional but not trying too hard, her grandmother's pearl earrings adding just enough elegance. Orion wears his good khakis, the ones without grass stains, and a button-down shirt he'd insisted on ironing himself. They'd been having a good time. Orion had explained his solar panel design to the mayor's aide, his hands moving excitedly as he described voltage and battery storage. Jordan had been proud, watching her son shine, feeling for once like they belonged in this world of municipal movers and shakers. Then Gage Lockwood looks up. The transformation happens in stages, like watching ice crack across a frozen lake. First, casual scanning of the crowd, then a double take. His stride falters, just a half step, barely noticeable unless you're cataloguing every movement. His eyes lock onto Orion with an intensity that makes nearby conversations stutter and stop. The boy stands in profile, laughing at something the snow cone vendor said, and in that angle, in that light, the truth writes itself across his features. The distinctive nose, aquiline, inherited from someone's Portuguese grandmother. the way his forehead slopes, the particular curve of his ear. Even his laugh carries an echo of boardroom confidence, genetic architecture asserting itself despite never having met its blueprint. Gage's face cycles through emotions like a slot machine landing on disaster, recognition, calculation, something that might be wonder or might be fear. Sloane notices his stillness first. Her gaze follows him, lands on Orion, processes the visual data with computer-like efficiency. Her smile doesn't falter, Sloane's smiles never do, but something behind it shifts, hardens, goes frigid. She adjusts Aurora's blanket with movements suddenly too precise, too controlled. "Gage," she says, voice pitched low enough that only he and Lena hear. A warning wrapped in wedding rings and joint bank accounts. But Gage has already started walking. Jordan sees him coming. Of course she does. You don't forget the face of someone who changed your life's trajectory, even when that change came through absence. Her hand finds Orion's shoulder, not pulling him back, just making contact, establishing position. "Mom?" Orion's confusion carries perfectly in the space between jazz songs. Why is that man looking at us like he knows us? Camera shutters click in rapid succession. A train horn echoes from the industrial district, lonely and long. The question hangs there, suspended like the paper lanterns overhead. One sways in the evening breeze, casting shifting shadows that make everyone's faces look briefly unfamiliar, then familiar again. Orion's hand tightens on his snow cone, red syrup dripping onto concrete. Jordan doesn't look away from Gage's approach. Her composure remains intact. She's had 11 years to prepare for some version of this moment, though she'd imagined it differently. Maybe in a lawyer's office, maybe through certified mail, maybe never. Sometimes, she tells her son, keeping her voice gentle, steady, the same tone she uses when explaining why his grandparents on his father's side never send birthday cards. Grown-ups finally see what they should have seen a long time ago. The space between Gage and Jordan shrinks. 20 feet, 15, 10. Behind him, Sloane stands frozen, Aurora beginning to fuss as if sensing the atmospheric pressure drop. Lena Cho's fingers fly across her phone, likely drafting crisis management scenarios. The Channel 7 cameraman, sensing blood in the water, swings his lens toward the developing scene. 5 feet now. Gage stops just outside the range of a handshake, close enough to see the bronze flecks in Jordan's brown eyes, the ones Orion inherited along with his father's jawline. Close enough to catch her perfume, something simple and clean that triggers a memory. Georgetown University, senior year. A study group that became coffee, coffee that became dinner, dinner that became breakfast. 12 years ago, when futures were theoretical and consequences belonged to other people. Jordan, the word hangs in the air between them, 12 years of silence compressed into 3 syllables. Around them, the fundraiser continues its surface motions, but their small corner of the universe has stopped rotating. Orion looks up at his mother, then at this stranger who somehow isn't a stranger, his 11-year-old mind already calculating equations that don't quite balance. Jordan meets Gage's eyes with a steadiness that costs her more than anyone watching could know. Years of preparation for a moment she hoped would never come, and here it is, under paper lanterns at a community fundraiser, with her son's hand sticky with melted snow cone, and 3 photographers documenting what will become tomorrow's headlines. The jazz trio finishes their song. In the silence before the next one begins, the entire crowd seems to hold its breath, waiting to see what happens when a billionaire's carefully constructed present collides with the past he never knew existed. The first time Gage Lockwood met Jordan Carter, she had ink on her fingers, not the romantic kind from a fountain pen, but the industrial blue-black that comes from fighting with a temperamental printer at 2 in the morning. She stood at the self-serve copier, muttering threats at the machine that had just eaten her senior thesis draft for the third time. "If you kick it from the left side, sometimes it releases the paper," Gage offered, approaching with his own stack of business plans. She glanced at him, this guy in a wrinkled Oxford shirt who somehow made exhaustion look intentional, and actually laughed. "Speaking from experience?" 3 years of experience. This machine and I have an understanding. It respects violence. That's how it started. Not with grand gestures or immediate attraction, but with shared frustration and the particular camaraderie of students running on caffeine and deadline adrenaline. They ended up at the 24-hour ramen place afterward, comparing dreams over cheap noodles. She wanted to revolutionize public health data systems. He was going to transform global shipping logistics with an algorithm he'd been perfecting since sophomore year. "You know what your problem is," Jordan said, pointing her chopsticks at his napkin covered in supply chain diagrams. "You think too big. Start with one port. Perfect the system. Then expand." "You know what yours is?" he countered, studying her grant proposal. "You think too small. Why pilot in one clinic when you could deploy across an entire network?" They balanced each other. Through winter months when the heat in her apartment barely worked, they'd study at his place, papers spread across every surface. She'd make coffee at 3 a.m. while he coded. He'd quiz her for her public health exams while debugging his software. Their relationship existed in the margins of ambition, stolen moments between library sessions, kisses that tasted like energy drinks, dreams shared in whispers so they wouldn't jinx them. The copy shop became their unofficial meeting place. Tuesday and Thursday nights, they'd converge there with whatever needed printing, his investor decks, her research proposals, occasionally something frivolous like concert tickets or recipes they'd never actually have time to cook. The staff knew them by name, and kept the good stapler behind the counter for their use. Spring semester of senior year brought escalation. Gage's startup, CargoStream, secured its first serious investor meeting. A venture capital firm in Boston wanted to see the full platform demonstration. Jordan helped him rehearse his pitch, playing the role of skeptical investor, asking the hard questions about scalability and market penetration. "You need to slow down when you talk about the algorithm," she told him after the 5th run-through. "You get excited and start assuming everyone knows what you mean by dynamic routing optimization. Explain it like you're talking to someone who thinks logistics is just another word for planning." He took her advice. The pitch meeting went well enough to secure seed funding, not millions but enough to quit his part-time job and focus on development full-time after graduation. By May they had plans. Not formal engagement plans. Gage didn't do formal, not then, but understood things. Her job offer at the Seattle Department of Public Health. His plan to build CargoStream from a Seattle base, cheaper than San Francisco, close to major ports. The studio apartment they'd looked at in Capitol Hill, small but affordable, with windows that faced east toward morning light. 2 years, Gage said one night, lying on her dorm room floor because her bed was too small for 2 people to actually sleep. 2 years to get CargoStream stable, then we can think about bigger things. House, maybe marriage, definitely a better mattress. Jordan had laughed, traced the line of his jaw. "Marriage is a maybe, but a better mattress is definitely. Priorities," he said, grinning. "I'm a practical man." They were so young, so certain that love and logistics could coexist, that ambition and partnership weren't mutually exclusive, that the future would unfold according to plans made on dorm room floors. Launch week was supposed to change everything. Gage's algorithm, CargoStream, would debut with 3 major shipping companies already signed on. The technology would cut routing inefficiencies by 30%, saving millions in fuel costs while reducing carbon emissions. The environmental angle made it marketable beyond just profit margins. The press releases were ready. The demo was flawless. Tech blogs had already scheduled their coverage. Then, 72 hours before launch, their competitor released an almost identical system. Not similar, identical, down to variable names in the code that Gage had personally created, quirky references to obscure sci-fi novels that no one else would think to use. Someone had accessed his servers, stolen 18 months of work, and handed it to Meridian Logistics, a company that just happened to have Sloan Mercer's uncle on its board of directors. The emergency meeting was convened in a borrowed conference room at a co-working space. Gage had exactly 4 employees at that point, 3 developers and 1 intern who handled administrative tasks. They sat around a table designed for brainstorming sessions, now serving as a war room. It had to be someone with access, the forensic IT consultant said, spreading printouts across the table. Someone who knows your passwords, your patterns, your schedule. The breach was too clean, too targeted. This wasn't a random hack. The consultant had been hired by Thomas Mercer himself, Sloane's father, who'd arrived within hours of the leak news breaking. Gage hadn't called him, didn't even know how he'd found out. But suddenly, the older man was there, tall and silver-haired, taking charge with the natural authority of someone who'd salvaged Fortune 500 companies from bigger disasters. "We'll handle this," Thomas said, his hand on Gage's shoulder feeling more like a grip than support. "But we need complete transparency. Everyone who had access to your systems, everyone." The list was short. 3 developers, all of whom had been with him since the beginning, all of whom had their own equity stakes in the company's success. The intern, a computer science student from UW who barely understood the code beyond basic file management. Jordan Sloan Mercer started appearing at the emergency meetings on day 2. Gage hadn't invited her. They'd met exactly once, at a networking event where she'd given him her card and mentioned that her family's foundation sometimes invested in promising tech startups. Now she was there, always perfectly dressed, always asking questions that sounded helpful but landed like accusations. "When did Jordan get access to your repository?" Sloan asked during the 3rd meeting, her tone suggesting innocent curiosity. "She's had login credentials for months," Gage admitted. "She helps me proofread documentation sometimes, catches grammar issues, so she could access the source code. Technically, yes, but she doesn't know programming. She wouldn't even know what she was looking at." "But someone who paid her might know what to look for," Thomas Mercer observed, not quite making an accusation, just noting a possibility. Paige Kim, Sloane's friend and now mysteriously part of the crisis team, pulled up a calendar on her laptop. "Didn't Jordan meet you for coffee on April 15th? The same day you had that phone conversation with Meridian about potential partnership terms?" True. But Jordan had been grading papers at the next table, headphones in, completely absorbed in evaluating someone's epidemiology research proposal. "And she suggested you back up everything to Cloud Vault," Paige continued. "The service that had that security vulnerability reported last year, also true, but half of the tech industry used Cloud Vault. It was standard practice." "I'm not accusing anyone," Thomas clarified, his lawyer voice smooth as expensive scotch. "I'm simply noting patterns. Jordan argued against you signing exclusive contracts with any single shipping company, correct?" "Because she thought exclusivity would limit growth options," Gage explained, hearing how defensive he sounded. "Or because non-exclusive arrangements would make it easier for competitors to access your innovations," Sloan offered gently, as if this possibility pained her to mention. The framework built itself slowly, carefully. Each observation is perfectly reasonable in isolation, devastating in accumulation. The questions about his encryption methods that Jordan had asked, framed now as reconnaissance rather than girlfriend curiosity. The argument they'd had about him working with companies that had poor environmental records, including Meridian, recast as misdirection, making him think she opposed the very company she was allegedly helping. No one was directly accused. That would be crass, potentially libelous. Instead, they constructed a circumstantial case, brick by brick, until the architecture of suspicion felt solid enough to inhabit. "I'm not saying she did it," Thomas Mercer told Gage during a private conversation in an empty hallway. "I'm saying perception matters. If investors think your personal life compromised your professional assets, funding disappears, partnerships dissolve, you become the cautionary tale other founders tell to scare each other." He paused, letting the words settle. "But distance yourself now, publicly, and we control the narrative. Make it about corporate espionage, not personal betrayal. Show that you take security seriously enough to eliminate any possible vulnerability, even personal ones. My firm can manage the crisis response. Sloan's Family Foundation can provide bridge funding to replace what you'll lose from the botched launch. We turn disaster into opportunity." The offer came wrapped in logic, survival strategy dressed as business wisdom. The pulling away happened in increments, each step small enough to justify individually, together forming an abandonment. First, Gage stopped answering calls immediately. Crisis meetings were real, 12-hour days trying to salvage the launch, talking to lawyers about intellectual property theft, reassuring investors that cargo stream still had value despite the competitor's head start. But he could have called back during breaks, could have explained what was happening instead of letting silence fill the space where communication used to live. Text responses grew shorter. "Can't talk now. Then we'll explain later." Then nothing. Jordan's messages evolved from concern to confused to something that looked like desperation, though she tried to hide it. "Just tell me what's happening. Whatever you're dealing with, we can figure it out together." Her final voicemail, left at 11:47 p.m. on a Thursday. "I don't understand what's happening, but I know something is. If you think Gage, you know me. You know I would never. Please just talk to me. I'm not angry, I'm just scared. Please." The number she called the next day was disconnected. Not out of service, disconnected, deliberately severed. Gage had changed his number on Thomas Mercer's advice, giving the new one only to business contacts and family. Cut off the vulnerability, eliminate the variable, protect the asset. She wrote a letter instead, old-fashioned paper, her handwriting careful and clear across 3 pages. She mailed it to his office address, marked personal and confidential. The envelope arrived at Cargo Stream's temporary headquarters, a converted warehouse space in So-Do that smelled like coffee and desperation. Paige Kim, who'd somehow become Gage's unofficial administrative assistant during the crisis, signed for it. She held it for a moment, turned it over, and noted the return address. 3 weeks later, the letter came back to Jordan's apartment, stamped in red. Addressee no longer at this address. Paige's handwriting on the rerouting label, sending it back unopened. Not lost in the mail. Deliberately returned, the envelope seal still intact. Jordan's words never reaching their intended recipient. The morning sickness started 2 weeks after the letter came back. Jordan sat in her bathroom, pregnancy test in hand, listening to her neighbor's kettle whistle through thin walls. The sounds seemed to stretch, morphing into something else. Future crying, maybe, or the whistle of opportunity leaving the station without her. She was 22 years old. Her job at the Department of Public Health started in 6 weeks. Her student loans required payments beginning in 6 months. The apartment she'd planned to share with Gage had gone to someone else when she couldn't sign the lease alone. She could have fought back, could have gone public with her side. The pregnant girlfriend abandoned after mysterious accusations nobody would state directly. Could have demanded a paternity test, child support, acknowledgement. The media would have been interested. The narrative wrote itself. tech entrepreneur's pregnant girlfriend claims wrongful abandonment. The lawsuit would have been straightforward. Instead, she chose silence. Not because she was guilty. She'd never even understood the technical details of what had been stolen, let alone know how to steal it. Not because she was weak, but because she understood something the crisis managers didn't. Sometimes the truth is smaller than the machinery deployed to crush it. Sometimes protecting what you're building matters more than proving what you didn't break. She imagined the battle. Gage's lawyers, now backed by Mercer money, against her public defender-level resources. Depositions where she'd have to prove negative space, demonstrate that she hadn't done something. Media coverage that would follow her to job interviews, making every employer wonder if she was the loyal girlfriend wrongly accused or the corporate spy who got caught. And at the center of it all, a child, her child, who would grow up as evidence in a case, as a pawn in adult wars, as the leverage point in negotiations about money and access and reputation. She chose differently. Zuri Bennett lived 2 doors down in the Columbia City walk-up, a retired postal worker who'd raised 4 kids on her own and recognized the particular exhaustion of new single motherhood immediately. "Honey, you look like you're about to fall over," she said the day Jordan brought Orion home from the hospital. "Give me that baby and go shower. 15 minutes, go." That became their rhythm. Zuri would appear with casseroles that could stretch for 3 dinners, nothing fancy but filling, the kind of food that understands budgets. Jordan would reciprocate by helping with grocery runs when Zuri's arthritis flared, later teaching Zuri's grandkids basic coding when they needed homework help. They built a village of 2, then 3, then gradually more as other neighbors recognized their quiet mutual aid society. The single mom in 3 degrees Celsius who needed childcare coverage during night shifts, the elderly veteran in 2A who could fix anything but needed help reaching high shelves, the college student in 4B who babysat in exchange for help with statistics homework. Bills got creative. Jordan freelanced data analysis at night while Orion slept in his bassinet beside her desk, his small breathing sounds her background music while she cleaned datasets for research firms. She clipped coupons with the precision of her former algorithm work. She learned which thrift stores got the best donations on which days, how to make formulas last, and the exact number of hours she could work before childcare costs exceeded income. Her mother offered to help, conditionally. Phone calls that started with concern and ended with judgment. "Come home to Baltimore. I know people who could get you a position, a fresh start." Translation: come home and admit failure. Come home and let us reshape your story into something more palatable. Come home and pretend Seattle never happened. Jordan stayed. The city where Orion's father built his empire without knowing his son existed, where she could see CargoStream's headquarters from the bus she took to work, where proximity and distance lived in the same zip code, where she could give Orion a father's city without the father himself. For Gage, the lesson crystallized into something hard and protective. Control keeps you safe. Control the narrative. Control the access. Control the emotions that make you vulnerable to betrayal. He married Sloan 2 years after CargoStream went public, a union that made strategic sense on every level. Her family's connections opened doors. Her understanding of corporate politics complemented his technical innovation. Their wedding made the society pages, a union of innovation and legacy, and nobody asked uncomfortable questions about love. Trust became contractual. Prenuptial agreements, operating memoranda, clearly defined responsibilities and expectations. Love meant alliance. Partnership meant mutually beneficial arrangement. It worked, after a fashion. CargoStream thrived. The Lockwood name gained weight. He built an empire on the foundation of never being vulnerable again. For Jordan, the education took a different shape. Needing no one keeps you safe. not needing Gage's money, his name, his acknowledgement, not needing her mother's conditional support or society's validation, just her and Orion, sufficient unto themselves. She taught him early, we are complete as we are. We don't wait for rescue. We build what we need from what we have. Both beliefs worked, after a fashion. Both kept their owners functional, successful even by their own metrics. Both were about to shatter completely at a fundraiser under paper lanterns, where an 11-year-old boy's face would make denial impossible and truth would demand its accounting. The camera returns to the present, to Gage's mouth forming Jordan's name, to the moment before response, before the machinery of their careful distances begins its inevitable collapse. Jordan's response comes measured, controlled as a surgeon's first incision. Gage, just his name. No surprise in her voice, no anger, no warmth. A fact stated, like noting the weather or the time. But Orion picks up on the undercurrent immediately. Children always do. He shifts closer to his mother, snow cone forgotten, studying this stranger who somehow isn't strange. Gage's eyes drop to the boy. Up close, the resemblance becomes undeniable, almost aggressive in its clarity. Not just features, but mannerisms, the way Orion tilts his head when processing information, the specific furrow between his eyebrows that appears when he's concentrating. Genetics asserting themselves across years of absence. "What's your name?" Gage asks, his voice catching slightly on the simple question. Orion glances at his mother. Jordan gives the smallest nod, permission to engage but carefully. "Orion," the boy answers, then adds with the enthusiasm that belongs exclusively to 11-year-olds discussing their interests, like the constellation. "The Hunter. It has Betelgeuse and Rigel, which are actually different types of stars. One's a red supergiant and one's a blue-white supergiant. My science project is about solar energy, though, not astronomy. I'm testing different panel angles to maximize efficiency in Seattle's cloud coverage." The words tumble out in a rush that sounds exactly like Gage at his first investor pitch, that same mixture of expertise and eagerness. Several people nearby pretend not to watch while absolutely watching. Phone cameras lift subtly, trying to capture whatever this is without being obvious about their surveillance. "Solar energy," Gage repeats, as if the words are foreign, as if his brain is processing too many other calculations to properly engage with renewable power systems. That's impressive work." He wants to say more. "I want to ask about methodology, about data collection, about all the questions a father should have been asking for 11 years. But his throat has closed around the words, and all he can do is stare at this child who is undeniably, impossibly his. Sloane arrives at Gage's elbow with Aurora, having crossed the distance in swift, decisive steps that make her cream heels click against the community center's worn linoleum. Her presence changes the scene's chemistry immediately. She positions herself at an angle that photographs, well, protective mother, supportive wife, woman unruffled by unexpected encounters. Aurora fusses against her shoulder, tiny fists waving. "Gage," she says, her tone suggesting they're running late for something important that doesn't actually exist. Her eyes assess Jordan with the kind of comprehensive evaluation usually reserved for hostile takeover targets. Designer shoes to department store dress, pearl earrings that might be real to a baby with spit up on his collar. The calculation happens in seconds. Then, with a smile that radiates exactly zero warmth, "I don't believe we've met. I'm Sloane Lockwood." The emphasis on Lockwood is subtle but deliberate. A claim staked, territory marked. "Jordan Carter," comes the reply, equally cool. "This is my son, Orion." The word son lands with particular weight. Not "this is Orion" or "Orion, say hello." My son. Possession claimed, relationship established. No ambiguity about who has been doing the work of raising this child. Sloane's smile doesn't waver, Sloane's smiles never do, but something behind her eyes recalculates rapidly. She shifts Aurora, the movement drawing attention to the baby, to the family unit they represent, to the legitimate claim of marriage and shared offspring and legal documentation. How wonderful that you're involved in community education initiatives, Sloane says, each word perfectly enunciated. Supporting youth science is so important, isn't it, darling? This last directed at Gage, who seems to have temporarily lost the ability to form coherent sentences. He manages a nod, his eyes still fixed on Orion, who has returned to his snow cone, licking melted syrup from his knuckles in a gesture that Gage recognizes from his own childhood, from family photos where a younger version of himself did exactly the same thing. Lena Cho materializes at Sloane's other side, her publicist instincts screaming alarm at whatever is unfolding. She touches Sloane's elbow gently. The mayor wanted a photo before the environmental award presentation, she says, offering an exit strategy wrapped in obligation. Before the moment can deteriorate further, before photographers can capture whatever expression is building on Gage's face, before Sloane can deploy whatever strategic response she's calculating, Jordan takes control with practiced grace. She touches Orion's shoulder lightly, their signal, developed over years of navigating situations where adult complications threaten to overwhelm childhood simplicity. "Want to show me your rocket?" "You said Mr. Patterson, from the science committee, wanted to see the propulsion system you designed." Orion brightens, grateful for the redirect, for permission to return to the comfortable territory of things he understands. "It's at our table. I used baking soda and vinegar for the initial demonstration, but the actual design uses compressed air, which is way more efficient and doesn't make everything smell weird." He's already moving, talking over his shoulder about pressure ratios and trajectory calculations, his hands gesturing to illustrate concepts. Jordan follows, but not before meeting Gage's eyes one final time. The look lasts perhaps 2 seconds. In it, 11 years of silence, thousands of diaper changes he never knew about, first words he didn't hear, fevered nights she handled alone, school plays where the father seat stayed empty, questions about why some kids have dads and some don't, explanations she crafted to protect a child from feeling unwanted. Also in that look, "I survived you. We thrived without you. This accidental meeting changes nothing unless I decide it does." They walk away slowly, not flight, because Jordan Carter doesn't flee from anything. Each step deliberate, Orion chattering about Newton meters and thrust vectors, his hand-painted poster board tucked under one arm. The rocket itself, navy blue with silver details, catches the light from the paper lanterns. Glitter from the craft table earlier has somehow transferred to its surface, making it sparkle like an actual night sky. The glitter drifts through the air as they pass, each speck catching light like a small star, like possibilities, like the debris of impact when two lives collide after years of careful separation. Conversations resume in waves, starting at the edges and moving inward. The jazz trio, who'd stopped mid-song without consciously realizing it, picks up again with something upbeat and desperately cheerful. But the whispers have already started their viral spread, moving from person to person like a game of telephone, where the message stays remarkably consistent. "Was that?" "The resemblance is..." "How old do you think?" "Sloane's face, did you see?" The Channel 7 cameraman reviews his footage, knowing he's captured something significant, but not quite sure what the story is yet. The mayor's aide makes rapid notes in her phone, already considering the political implications of being associated with whatever scandal is clearly brewing. 3 separate Instagram stories go live within minutes, all carefully captioned with questions rather than statements, legal liability masked as innocent curiosity. Thomas Mercer appears as if summoned by crisis itself, his approach swift and purposeful. He doesn't speak to Gage immediately, too obvious, too reactive. Instead, he positions himself near Sloane, his presence a reminder of family power, of resources, of the machinery that protected Gage once and could do so again. Sloane's phone is already out, her fingers moving rapidly across the screen. Not social media, something more strategic. Her family's attorney, perhaps, or her publicist, or both, in rapid succession, mobilizing response before the story can crystallize into something uncontrollable. Weather becomes the universal exit strategy. Looks like rain, people murmur, though the sky remains stubbornly clear. Should beat the traffic. Early morning tomorrow, the fundraiser empties with unusual efficiency, leaving only the organizing committee, the jazz trio who plays to increasingly empty space, and the small cluster of Lockwood associates who have formed a protective barrier around Gage and Sloane. Principal Ruth Fairchild watches the exodus with knowing eyes. She's seen enough parent drama to recognize when adult problems are about to become institutional problems. She makes a mental note to review the school's media policy and to check whether Orion Carter is registered under any other names that might connect him to the Lockwood family tree. Jordan's phone starts buzzing before she and Orion reach their 12-year-old Honda Civic in the parking lot. Unknown numbers, Seattle area codes, texts from acquaintances she hasn't heard from in years, suddenly wondering how she's doing, whether she's free for coffee, whether there's anything new in her life. She turns the phone to silent, focusing on Orion's continued excitement about his presentation. "Did you see how interested everyone was in the battery storage solution?" he asks, buckling his seatbelt with the automatic efficiency of a child who's been doing this task since he was tall enough to reach the buckle himself. "Ms. Rodriguez said she might know someone at the university who could help me test the larger prototype. Do you think we could visit the engineering department?" "That's wonderful, baby," Jordan manages, pulling out of the parking lot while checking her mirrors for following vehicles. None yet, but she knows that will change. Tomorrow, maybe the day after, someone will decide there's a story worth pursuing. At home, their two-bedroom apartment in Columbia City, comfortable but modest, filled with thrift store furniture and Orion's science projects in various states of completion, she maintains normalcy with the discipline of someone who's had years of practice. Dinner happens, leftover pasta reheated, salad from the bag, garlic bread that Orion likes because she lets him add extra butter. Homework gets checked, math problems about probability that feel ironically appropriate given the day's events. The bedtime routine unfolds as, always, shower, reading time with whatever book he's currently 3/4 through, lights out by 9:30. Only after Orion's door closes does Jordan allow herself to sit at the kitchen table and breathe. Really breathe. The kind that comes from your stomach and makes your ribs ache. The kind that releases tension you didn't know you were holding. Her phone sits on the table, still silenced but vibrating periodically with incoming messages. She doesn't look at it. Not yet. First, she needs to think, to plan, to prepare for whatever comes next. Because something is coming. Gage knows now. Sloane knows. By tomorrow, half of Seattle's elite social circle will know or will think they know. The machinery that once targeted her will activate again, but this time with a child in the crossfire. The knock comes at 9:45, because of course it does. Good neighbors know when something's happened before you tell them, and can sense disturbance in the atmosphere like animals before earthquakes. "Saw the news alert," Zuri says, holding up her phone without a preamble. The headline reads, "Billionaire philanthropist's fundraiser appearance sparks questions." The accompanying photo shows Gage staring at Orion, the resemblance obvious even from 20 feet away, even in the mediocre lighting of a community center. "You okay?" "I don't know," Jordan admits, which is more honest than she's been with anyone else, maybe more honest than she's been with herself. Zuri makes tea without asking, the ritual of it soothing. She knows where everything lives in this kitchen. The mismatched mugs, the honey that Orion likes in his chamomile, the good cookies hidden in the back of the cabinet above the refrigerator. They sit at the table with its wobbly leg, steam rising between them like shared breath. He had to find out sometime, Zuri says finally, her voice carrying the weight of someone who's lived long enough to know that secrets have expiration dates. I know. Orion's going to have questions. I know that too. You did right by that boy. Whatever happens next, whatever that man or his wife or their lawyers try to claim, you did right. Don't let anyone tell you differently. The validation lands somewhere soft and necessary. Jordan nods, not trusting her voice for a moment. At 11:14 p.m., a different kind of message arrives. Not from the media, not from curious friends, not from her mother whose voicemail she's been avoiding. The number shows as unknown, but the words could only come from one person. I need to speak with you. Not at a public event. Please, no signature, but Gage's communication style remains unchanged after 12 years. Direct, assuming agreement that please added like an afterthought because someone probably told him it sounds less demanding. Jordan stares at the screen for a full minute, aware that Zuri is watching her, aware that responding opens a door she welded shut 11 years ago, aware that not responding is also a choice with consequences. She types back, Harbour and Second, bench by the water. Thursday noon, no PR, no cameras, no Sloan, just you and me. His response comes immediately, as if he's been holding his phone, waiting, agreed. Thursday noon, the location matters. Harbour and Second sits at the waterfront, public enough for safety but not so crowded that every word gets overheard. The bench she's chosen faces the water, where conversations get carried away by wind and wave sound, where tourists don't typically linger in November cold. She sat on that bench once before, 11 years ago, 8 weeks pregnant and deciding whether to leave Seattle entirely, whether to go home to Baltimore and let her mother's judgment reshape her into something more acceptable, whether to disappear completely and raise Orion somewhere that didn't carry Gage's name on buildings and in newspaper headlines. She didn't leave then. She won't run now. The kitchen light casts warm shadows as she shows Zuri the exchange. Her friend nods slowly, understanding the significance of Jordan setting terms, choosing ground, controlling what she can control in a situation where control has always been limited. You want company? I could sit in my car nearby just in case, Zuri offers. No, this needs to be clean. Just him and me and whatever words should have been said 11 years ago. She pauses, considers. But thank you. For being the backup I can count on even when I don't use it. Zuri reaches across the table, squeezes her hand once. That boy is lucky to have you. I'm lucky to have him, Jordan corrects. He's the best thing I ever made. After Zuri leaves, Jordan sits alone in her kitchen, looking at the refrigerator covered in Orion's artwork, at the calendar marking their simple, stable life, at the apartment that has been sufficient and safe. Thursday is 3 days away. 3 days to prepare for a conversation that's 11 years overdue. 3 days to decide what she wants from a man who disappeared when she needed him most and now returns because biology made denial impossible. She didn't sleep well that night, but then again, she hasn't slept well since she was 22 years old and in love with someone who believed the worst of her without asking questions. Thursday arrives grey and windswept, the kind of Seattle day where the sky presses down like a wool blanket and the temperature hovers in that zone where you can't decide if you need a heavier jacket. Jordan arrives 5 minutes early, choosing the exact middle of the bench, not leaving room for assumptions about closeness or distance. She wears jeans and the raincoat she's had since graduate school. Deliberate choices that say, I am not trying to impress you. Gage appears exactly at noon, punctual as a court summons. He's dressed down, for him, in khakis and a fleece jacket that probably cost more than her monthly grocery budget, but looks deliberately ordinary. He stops 6 feet away, hands visible at his sides, as if approaching something that might startle. May I? He gestures to the bench. She nods. He sits, leaving enough space between them for another person, for 11 years of absence, for everything unsaid. For 30 seconds, neither speaks. Waves lap against the pier below. A seagull fights another over a French fry someone dropped. The city continues around them, ferry horns in the distance, traffic on Alaskan Way, the ordinary sounds of a weekday afternoon. 2 people on a bench could be anything, strangers, co-workers, friends meeting for lunch. Finally, Gage asks, careful as handling explosives, is he? Yes, Jordan says, cutting through the question before he has to finish it. Yes, Orion is your son. Biologically, legally, factually. There's no ambiguity here. Relief floods his face first, followed immediately by something harder to name. Grief, maybe, for the years already gone. His hand moves toward his pocket, probably for his phone, probably to document or verify or create some kind of proof. Then stops. Old habits of controlling information are dying hard. I didn't know, he says, which is both obvious and necessary. Jordan, I swear I didn't know he existed. I know you didn't. How could you possibly know that? She turns to look at him directly for the first time since he sat down. Because whatever else you became, you wouldn't have ignored your own child. Your ego wouldn't have allowed it. You'd need to be involved, to shape him, to see yourself reflected back. Absent by ignorance, I can believe. Deliberate abandonment doesn't fit your personality structure. The assessment lands sharp but accurate. Gage nods slowly, accepting the cut as deserved, almost clinical in its precision. I tried to tell you, Jordan continues, voice steady as a deposition. Called your number 18 times over 2 weeks. It went straight to a message saying the number was no longer in service. Send a certified letter to your office address. It came back marked, addressee no longer at this address. Your assistant at the time, Paige Kim, had rerouted it. I still have the envelope. Gage's jaw tightens. He didn't know about the letter, clearly, but he knows about the number change, about Paige's loyalty to Sloan even back then, about the machinery that was deployed to isolate him from anyone deemed a threat. By then, Jordan continues, your crisis team had made it clear I was the prime suspect in your data leak. I had 3 different law firms send me cease and desist letters about defamatory communications and harassment of their client. Thomas Mercer himself called my supervisor at the health department, expressing concern about my access to sensitive information, wondering if I'd been properly vetted. He did what? Gage's voice carries genuine shock. He tried to get me fired. Didn't succeed, but he made my probationary period significantly more scrutinized. She says it matter-of-factly, without heat, reporting data. So when I discovered I was pregnant, I did the math. What would fighting look like? Court battles I couldn't afford. Paternity suits against a billionaire's legal team. Media coverage that would follow me to every job interview for the rest of my life. And at the center of it all, a child who would grow up as evidence, as a pawn, as leverage. She watches a jogger pass, waiting until they're out of earshot. I could have forced it. Court orders, DNA tests, child support garnishment. I had proof, text messages, photos, a timeline that would have held up legally. Tech billionaire abandons. Pregnant girlfriend after false accusations. It would have played well on social media, probably would have gotten you some negative press. Maybe affected your next funding round. Why didn't you? The question hangs simple and enormous between them. Because I wasn't going to bring my child into that fire. You'd already decided I was guilty of something I didn't do. Your entire circle, Sloane, her father, that whole apparatus, they'd built a narrative where I was the villain. What kind of life would Orion have had growing up in that war? What kind of childhood happens when you're constantly referenced in legal documents and settlement negotiations? The ownership of past choices settles between them, heavy and real. I chose peace over vindication. I chose his stability over proving I was right. I chose to build a life that didn't depend on your acknowledgement or your money or your belated guilt. Here's what's going to happen now, Jordan says, shifting into the tone she uses for non-negotiable project requirements at work. If you want to know Orion, and I mean actually know him, not own him, not display him, not use him to rehabilitate whatever guilt you're carrying, we do this my way. She pulls out a single sheet of paper from her jacket pocket, handwritten notes in bullet points. Gage recognizes the format. It's how she used to organize their study sessions, everything essential distilled to core components. Some things don't change. Child first. Every single decision runs through that filter, not what's best for your marriage, your business reputation, your public image, your family's comfort level. What's best for Orion? If those things align, great. If they don't, Orion wins. Every time. Non-negotiable. Of course. She holds up a hand, cutting him off. Let me finish. Slowly. He's 11. His entire life has been one truth. He has a mother who loves him, and a father who wasn't in the picture. Now there's a different truth emerging. We don't rush this because you suddenly discovered fatherhood, or because Sloane wants to control the narrative, or because the media is asking questions. We move at Orion's pace. Some days that might feel fast to you. Some days it'll feel impossibly slow. You don't get to decide the speed. He does. Gage nods, not trusting himself to speak yet. In writing. Any agreements, schedules, boundaries, changes to arrangements, all documented. Not because I don't trust you specifically, but because I don't trust the machine around you. Your lawyers, your publicists, your father-in-law who thinks everything can be managed like a corporate restructuring. Words on paper mean something. They create accountability. She hands him the paper. His hands aren't quite steady taking it. This document that offers him entry into his son's life on terms he doesn't control. No cameras. No sudden appearances at his school, no statements to the media until Orion is ready, which might be never, and you need to make peace with that possibility. No introducing him to business associates as your son until he decides he wants that relationship public. No leveraging his existence for any purpose other than actually being his father. The list continues. Neutral public locations for initial meetings. Jordan present for the first month minimum. No gifts that cost more than $50 without prior approval. No making promises about the future until you've proven you can show up for the present. Yes, he says simply when she finishes. Yes to all of it. Whatever you need, whatever he needs. No negotiation, no lawyers reviewing terms before he commits, no strategic amendments to protect his interests. Just acceptance, immediate and complete. The gratitude in his expression isn't theatrical. Gage never did theatrical well. Instead, it's quiet, almost prayer-like, the kind of thanks that comes from receiving something you don't deserve but desperately want. When can I? He stops, restructures the sentence. What would be appropriate for a first meeting? With him knowing who I am, I mean. Jordan appreciates the careful phrasing. This man who once commanded boardrooms with bold certainties now asking permission for the basics of fatherhood. Saturday, Volunteer Park, 2 o'clock. There's an open field where people fly kites and remote control planes. He goes there sometimes. Bring a kite if you want. Nothing excessive, just something from the hardware store. He'll probably explain aerodynamics to you. Let him. I'll be there, 2 o'clock. Saturday. Gage. She waits until he meets her eyes fully. He's brilliant and kind and curious about everything. He reads at a 10th grade level and still sleeps with a stuffed elephant he's had since he was 2. He hates strawberries but loves spicy food. He asks questions constantly and actually listens to the answers. He deserves a father who sees him as he is, not as a second chance or a missed opportunity or a genetic legacy. Can you be that? The question isn't rhetorical. She needs an actual answer. I want to try, he says, and then, more firmly, I will try. I'll mess up sometimes, probably. But I'll keep trying. It's the most honest thing he's said in 12 years. Saturday arrives clear and bright. November cooperating for once with temperatures in the low 50s and actual sunshine breaking through Seattle's typical cloud cover. Orion stands beside his mother at the park entrance, his jacket zipped but not all the way, his expression carefully neutral, the face of a child who's been told something enormous and is still processing what it means. He knows the basics now. Jordan told him Thursday night, after homework, sitting on his bed with the elephant between them like a mediator. The man from the fundraiser is his father. There were complicated reasons for the absence that weren't about Orion being unwanted. They're going to try spending time together, slowly, to see if they can build something. Orion had been quiet for a long time, then asked, "Does he know about the science fair? Not why did he leave or does he love me, but something concrete, measurable." Classic Orion, retreating to facts when emotions got complicated. "He knows you're smart and curious and love science," Jordan had answered. "He'll learn the rest as you get to know each other." Now, watching Gage approach across the grass carrying a simple diamond kite in red and yellow, Orion stands very still. Gage stops 10 feet away, lets Orion set the approach pace, lets the child decide when proximity becomes acceptable. "Hi," Gage says simply. "I brought a kite. Thought maybe you could teach me how to fly it properly. I'm pretty terrible at it." The admission of incompetence is strategic but also true. Gage grew up with tutors and structured activities, not afternoons at the park figuring out wind patterns. The trick is understanding lift and drag, Orion offers after a moment, testing. Most people focus on running fast, but angle matters more. You want to let the wind do the work. Would you show me? They spend the next hour with the kite, Gage asking questions that let Orion explain, Orion gradually relaxing into the familiar territory of teaching someone something he understands. The kite crashes 3 times. Orion patiently explains what went wrong each time: angle too steep, string too loose, released at the wrong moment in the wind cycle. When the kite finally catches properly and soars, both of them watch it climb. Gage glances at Jordan, who's sitting on a bench 20 yards away, close enough to intervene if needed, but far enough to give them space. She nods once, acknowledgement that this is going okay. The following week, they meet at the same park for soccer. Gage wears running shoes, not cleats, coming to participate rather than dominate. They pass the ball back and forth, Orion demonstrating a move he learned in rec league, Gage trying and failing and trying again until he almost gets it right. "You're not very coordinated," Orion observes with 11-year-old bluntness. "I'm really not," Gage agrees. "I was always better with computers than sports. Still am." "Me too. But my friend David says exercise helps your brain work better, so I try." David sounds smart. They develop a rhythm over the following weeks, Saturdays 2 to 4, public spaces, activities that allow conversation without forced eye contact. The Science Museum, where Orion explains exhibits to Gage with the confidence of someone who's read all the plaques multiple times. The waterfront, where they eat fish and chips and watch ferries. The library, where Orion has strong opinions about the science fiction section's organization, Punctuality becomes love's language. Gage never arrives late, never cancels, except once when Aurora has a health scare that requires an emergency room visit. He texts Jordan immediately, "Aurora is sick, needs to cancel today. I'm sorry. Can we reschedule for Sunday at the same time?" And then, after Aurora is diagnosed with croup and sent home, "She's okay. Still want to make up our time if Orion wants." Each prompt arrival, each kept commitment, each "may I" instead of "I will" says, "You matter. This matters." I'm learning from missing everything else. 3 weeks into this careful construction, the letter arrives via courier at Jordan's apartment, requiring signature. Heavy cream stationery, embossed law firm letterhead, the weight of expensive representation. "Ms. Carter," it begins, managing to make her name sound vaguely accusatory. "While we respect your desire to establish parameters regarding minor child Orion Carter's interaction with Mr. Lockwood, we must advise that any formal arrangements should be negotiated through proper legal channels to ensure all parties' interests are protected." Translation: "We don't trust you not to exploit this situation financially." The letter continues with veiled warnings about reputational considerations, fiduciary responsibilities to corporate stakeholders, and the importance of unified messaging in matters affecting leadership credibility. Hidden in legalese, major donors are asking questions. Stock analysts are wondering if this affects Gage's judgment. Sloane's family is concerned about how this looks, how it plays, how it might impact their own investments and social standing. Additionally, the final paragraph notes with false warmth, "Mrs. Sloane Lockwood wishes to extend an invitation for Orion to join their family for Thanksgiving, as befitting his place in the extended family structure. We trust you'll give this generous offer appropriate consideration." Jordan reads it twice, photographs it for her records, then files it in the folder she started labeled legal, Lockwood. Her response, drafted carefully and sent through her own attorney, a friend from law school who handles family law and owes her several favors, is professionally brief. All communication regarding Orion Carter shall continue directly between his mother and Mr. Lockwood. The current arrangement is working well for the child in question, which remains the priority. Thanksgiving plans are already established with our family. Thank you for your interest. 2 more letters arrive over the next week, each more insistent than the last, each trying a slightly different angle. Concerns about proper legal documentation of paternity, suggestions about age-appropriate psychological counseling to help Orion process this transition, offers of educational trust funds and opportunities that come with so many strings attached, they might as well be nets. Gage, to his credit, tells Avery to stop sending them. Jordan overhears part of the phone conversation during a Saturday handoff, Gage's voice tight with frustration. "I said no more letters. I'm handling this directly with Jordan. Your job is to keep the board calm, not to interfere with my personal life." But they both know Sloane is likely directing the campaign from behind the scenes, using lawyers as proxies for control she can't exert directly. "She's trying to protect her family," Gage explains during one bench meeting. "They've started having weekly Thursday check-ins at Harbor and Second, 15 minutes to coordinate logistics and address issues before they become problems." Her family, Jordan corrects gently but firmly. "Orion and I are something else. Adjacent, maybe. Connected through him, through you. But not yours to protect or manage or absorb into the Lockwood empire. The distinction matters. It's the difference between Orion having a father and Orion becoming a Lockwood asset to be managed like any other investment. Every boundary she sets, meeting times, communication protocols, the slow pace of integration, the absolute prohibition on media involvement, creates space for Orion to know his father without losing himself in the machinery of wealth and expectation. Each note a rushed. Introductions or public appearances or expensive gifts is really a yes to his childhood remaining his own. The bench where they first talked has become their neutral ground for these negotiations. Every Thursday at noon, 15 minutes, updates and adjustments. Jordan mentions Orion's upcoming science fair. Would Gage like to attend? He would, very much. Gage asks about extending one Saturday visit by an hour to visit the Maritime Museum. Is that acceptable? It is, with 24 hours notice so Jordan can adjust her own plans. They're building something careful, and maybe even functional. Not friendship, they're not there yet, maybe won't ever be. But something like partnership, focused entirely on a child who deserves better than their past mistakes. The Thanksgiving invitation gets declined politely. Orion will spend it, as he always has, with Jordan and Zuri and the rotating cast of neighbors who've become chosen families. Gage accepts this without argument, understanding that traditions don't shift just because biology has been revealed, but he asks, cautiously, respectfully, if he might drop by for an hour that afternoon, just to say hello, to bring a pie maybe. Jordan considers, asks Orion, gets his tentative okay, I guess, and agrees. 1 hour, 4 to 5. No expectations beyond presence, small bricks building something that might eventually hold weight. The first time Sloane appears at Orion's school, she arrives like a carefully staged entrance. It's a Thursday afternoon, the monthly PTA meeting that Jordan never misses because staying informed about school policy matters when you're a single parent navigating public education. Sloane enters the cafeteria wearing cream silk that belongs in a corporate boardroom, not a space that still smells faintly of chicken nuggets and industrial cleaning solution, her presence immediately shifting the room's energy. I thought I should be more involved in community education, she announces to the room at large, settling into a plastic chair as if it were designed specifically for her. Supporting local schools is so important, don't you think? She volunteers for the fundraising committee before anyone asks, mentions corporate sponsorship possibilities that make the treasurer's eyes widen, with possibilities of actually having a functional budget. She suggests a partnership model with local businesses that sounds generous until you pass the control mechanisms embedded in phrases like coordinated messaging and brand alignment. Jordan watches from her usual spot 3 rows back, taking actual notes on the curriculum discussion while Sloane performs concern. Their eyes meet once. Sloane's smile arrives perfect and cold, the kind that photographs beautifully while communicating clear threats. After the meeting, in the hallway by the water fountain, where parent clusters discuss carpools and playdates, Sloane positions herself strategically in Jordan's path. We should coordinate, she says, voice pitched low enough that passing parents can't hear. For Orion's sake, mixed messages confuse children. I'd hate for him to feel caught between competing narratives. There's no confusion, Jordan replies, steady as bedrock. His life is consistent. His routines are stable. He knows who handles what. But surely, as Gage's wife, I have a role in. You have whatever role Orion offers you, when and if he's ready. Not before. Not because it makes you comfortable or looks good for your family's image. Sloane's expression flickers. Anger, calculation, something that might be genuine hurt buried under strategy, before returning to its magazine cover neutrality. You can't keep him isolated from his father's family forever. That's not healthy for a child. I'm not isolating him from anyone. I'm protecting him from being overwhelmed. There's a difference, though I understand why you might not see it. The conversation ends there, both women understanding that battle lines are being drawn in language that sounds reasonable but carries entirely different meanings. The following week, Principal Fairchild requests a meeting with Jordan. Ruth Fairchild has run Franklin Elementary for 15 years, navigating budget cuts and entitled parents with equal skill, her grey hair pulled back in the same efficient style she's worn since the 90s, her desk organized with the precision of someone who manages chaos for a living. I wanted to check in, she begins, offering coffee from her personal French press, the good stuff she doesn't share with everyone. There's been some interest in Orion's academic progress from new parties, Sloane Lockwood, among others. I've had inquiries about advanced placement programs, private tutoring opportunities, acceleration tracks that would move him to a different school, all coupled with mentions of potential donations, naturally. Very generous potential donations. The word naturally carries weight, acknowledgement of games being played above a child's head. There was also, Ruth continues, choosing words carefully, a mention from Thomas Mercer's office about how schools depend on community support, how funding situations can change quickly based on relationships with key stakeholder families. The copier in the outer office hums steadily, its rhythm mixing with the distant sound of a class reciting multiplication tables, the daily machinery of education grinding against the gears of wealth and influence. A threat, Jordan states flatly, an observation. But I want you to know something. Ruth leans forward, her expression shifting from administrator to advocate. I've been doing this long enough to recognize when adults are using children as chess pieces. Franklin Elementary runs on community support, yes. But community means everyone, single mothers, working families, tech executives, everyone. We don't auction off children's well-being for gymnasium renovations. The relief that floods through Jordan is physical, warming like good coffee. Thank you. Orion's a special kid, helps younger students with their science projects without being asked, shares his lunch with the boy who forgets his, reads to the kindergartners during buddy time. Whatever's happening with his father, with that family and their money and their influence, we keep school a safe space. That's non-negotiable. That evening, after Orion's asleep, Jordan sits with her laptop doing something she's avoided for weeks, actual timeline analysis. Not because she wants to dig into Gage's marriage, not because it's her business, but because Sloane's aggressive positioning feels wrong in ways that data might explain. The fundraiser was November 3rd. Sloane appeared with Aurora, described in the press coverage as 6 weeks old. That puts birth at approximately September 20th, give or take a few days. Working backward, conception would be late December or early January. She pulls up archived news articles. Cargo Stream's IPO was announced in February. The engagement announcement for Gage and Sloane appeared in March. Wedding in June. The timeline is possible. Babies arrive on their own schedules, early or late. But something nags at her, the way data inconsistencies used to in her public health work. She's about to close the laptop when she sees it, a society page photo from a February gala. Sloane in a fitted dress, accepting some philanthropic award, her figure showing no signs of pregnancy. If Aurora was born in September, Sloane would have been roughly 2 months pregnant in that photo, not showing dramatically perhaps, but the dress in the image is body-conscious enough that some indication should be visible. Jordan closes the laptop. This isn't her problem, not her marriage, not her concern. Whatever is happening in the Lockwood household stays there, but the question plants itself anyway, growing roots. What if Aurora isn't Gage's? 3 days later, Gage texts requesting an unscheduled meeting. Need to discuss something. Can we meet at the bench? Tomorrow, if possible. When they meet, he looks exhausted in a way that transcends simple sleep deprivation. There's something hollowed out in his expression, like a man who's discovered the foundation of his house is sand. I need to tell you something, he begins without preamble. I've arranged for a paternity test. For Aurora. Jordan keeps her face neutral, though her mind races through implications. Why are you telling me this? Because, depending on results, things might get complicated. Media attention, legal proceedings, Sloane's family's response. It could create noise around Orion, and you have a right to prepare. To protect him from whatever fallout happens. You think she's not yours. It's not a question. Gage stares at the water, at a container ship moving slowly toward the port, carrying cargo his software probably routed. The timeline is questionable. Her blood type doesn't match either of ours. That can happen, but it raised questions. And there are behavioral indicators that made me look closer. He doesn't elaborate on the behavioral indicators, though his expression suggests they're damning. I'm having the test done quietly. Private lab, sealed results, no announcement regardless of outcome. You could weaponize this, Jordan observes. Use it as leverage. Make her back off from interfering with Orion. I could. And she'd fire back. Probably drag you and Orion into the media circus as deflection. Mutually assured destruction, with kids as collateral damage. He turns to her. I won't do that. Whatever the results show, I handle it privately. Lawyers, settlement if necessary, custody arrangements for Aurora, regardless of biology. But no spectacle. Just the truth, dealt with like adults. The medical lab envelope appears in his jacket pocket, still sealed. He's already had the test done, already has results waiting, already knows the truth he's about to confirm. The blog post appears on a Wednesday morning, splashed across Seattle Social, the gossip site that pretends to be lifestyle journalism. The other woman's long game, patience and paternity, sprawls across the header, accompanied by photos from the fundraiser, carefully cropped to make Jordan look calculating. The article paints her as strategic, patient, someone who waited 11 years for maximum impact before revealing Orion's existence. It speculates about convenient timing given CargoStream's recent stock performance. It mentions her modest circumstances with photos pulled from old real estate listings, her government employment made to sound like minimal achievement rather than meaningful public health work. The comment section fills with armchair analysts wondering about motivations, debating whether she's a victim or an opportunist, dissecting her character based on 3 photographs and 0 actual information. Jordan's phone explodes. Former colleagues calling to check in, reporters requesting comment, her mother leaving a voicemail that starts with, "I warned you this would happen," and deteriorates from there. Someone has found her LinkedIn profile and left comments on 5-year-old posts about data visualization. She powers off the phone, makes Orion breakfast like any other day. Oatmeal with brown sugar, orange juice. The routine that says nothing has changed even when everything feels unstable. She drives him to school, walks him to the entrance, hugs him goodbye exactly as always. A photographer tries to approach during afternoon pickup. Jordan walks past him like he's invisible, opens the car door for Orion, drives away without acknowledgement. No comment, no reaction, no fuel for whatever fire they're trying to build. "Mom, why was that man taking pictures of us?" Orion asks in the car, his voice smaller than usual. "Some people are very interested in boring things," she replies, keeping her tone light. "Like what we eat for lunch or where we buy groceries. It's silly, but it'll pass. People get bored and move on to the next thing. Is it because of my dad?" The question lands heavy. She merges onto the highway before answering. "Yes. Your dad is successful and well known, so some people think his life is interesting to write about. That includes you now, because you're connected to him. But we don't have to participate. We just keep living our regular life, and eventually they'll realize it's not very exciting and leave us alone." That evening, Gage calls from his actual number, not the anonymous one he'd been using for discretion. "I saw the article. My team can respond, issue a statement shutting it down. That would just confirm it matters. Let them speculate. Orion and I have dealt with worse than gossip and bad photography. You shouldn't have to deal with any of it." "No," she agrees. "But that's different from whether we can. We're capable of handling this. The question is whether you can handle not fixing it for us. The distinction clearly hasn't occurred to him. After a long pause, "You're right, I'm sorry, old habits, wanting to control the narrative, manage the crisis. I know. But this isn't a crisis you can manage away. This is just life being messy and public. We endure it, we don't engage with it, and we definitely don't feed it." Despite the media noise, despite Sloane's maneuvering at school, despite the letters from lawyers, the Saturday visits continue unchanged. Gage begins learning his son's patterns, filing away information like critical data for a system he's trying to understand. Orion thinks best while moving, walking, throwing a ball, building something with his hands. He goes quiet when processing emotions, but becomes animated when excited about ideas. He hates strawberries with a passion that seems disproportionate to the fruit's offense, loves Thai food specifically because of the spice level, and reads 3 books simultaneously, switching between them based on mood and mental state. "Why do you do that?" Gage asks one afternoon at the library, watching Orion return one book and pull out a completely different one than he'd been reading 20 minutes earlier. "Different books for different brain modes," Orion explains, as if this is obvious. "This one's for when I want a story, this one's for when I want facts, and this one's for when I'm not sure what I want, but know I need something." Mom does the same thing with music. Gage recognizes the logic. It's how he processes information across multiple platforms, though he'd never articulated it so clearly. Genetics expressing themselves in operational patterns, not just physical features. One Saturday, the PTA holds a spaghetti dinner fundraiser. Gage asks if he can attend, not as Orion's father publicly, just as a community member who happens to be there. Jordan agrees cautiously. He shows up, pays for his meal, sits with Orion and Jordan at a corner table, and doesn't make it a performance. After dinner, chairs need stacking. Gage stays without being asked, folding tables and collecting trash while Orion helps smaller kids reach the coat hooks. These quiet acts, unremarkable and unrecorded, build something more solid than grand gestures ever could. Jordan watches from across the room as Gage explains to Orion the best way to stack folding chairs so they don't tip. This man probably has people who stack chairs for him, learning the simple mechanics of community cleanup alongside his son. "He's trying," Zuri observes, appearing at Jordan's elbow with the instinct of someone who knows when commentary is needed. "I know. That scares you." "Everything about this scares me," Jordan admits. But Orion deserves the chance to know his father, even if that father comes with complications and a wife who wants to manage him into submission. The paternity results for Aurora arrive on a Tuesday. Gage requests an emergency meeting at the bench, arrives with an envelope in hand that he doesn't immediately open. "Before I show you this," he says, "I need you to know it doesn't change anything with Orion. Whatever this says, however complicated things get with Sloane, my commitment to being Orion's father is separate, non-negotiable." "I believe you," Jordan says, and realizes she means it. He opens the envelope. The results are clear, definitive, unambiguous, probability of paternity 0%. Aurora is not Gage Lockwood's biological daughter. The revelation hangs between them, massive in its implications. Sloane's timeline wasn't just questionable, it was fiction. The perfect family portrait, the newborn that sealed their union 6 months after the wedding, the leverage she held as the mother of his child, all of it built on a lie so fundamental it reshapes everything. "What will you do?" Jordan asks. "I don't know yet. Lawyers are drafting options, annulment, divorce, custody arrangements that protect Aurora, regardless of biology, because she's still an infant who didn't choose any of this." He folds the paper carefully, returns it to the envelope. "But whatever happens between Sloane and me, it won't affect my relationship with Orion. That's the only thing I'm absolutely certain about." The question has fundamentally shifted. It's no longer is he Orion's father. Biology answered that definitively at the fundraiser, confirmed later in documentation. The real question now, can he become the father Orion needs? Can someone who failed so completely at recognizing truth learn to see clearly? Can trust be built when the foundation is all reconstruction? Truth has reset the goal, cleared away one family fiction while another, more honest structure might be built. But first, Gage has to survive whatever storm Sloane unleashes when she discovers he knows. The Lockwood Family Foundation convenes its quarterly meeting in a glass-walled conference room overlooking Elliott Bay. Sloane sits at the head of the table, not technically her designated seat, but no one challenges her positioning. The agenda lists routine matters, grant disbursements, community partnerships, scholarship fund allocations. The real business comes under new matters. I've been reviewing our community engagement portfolio, Sloane begins, her tablet displaying spreadsheets that make generosity look clinical, transactional. Several of our current partnerships may need reassessment given recent circumstances. Thomas Mercer nods from his position beside her, understanding exactly where this is heading, probably having scripted parts of it himself. Franklin Elementary, for instance. She pulls up the school's file with a swipe. We've supported their STEM program for 3 years. Generous funding, unrestricted use. But recent associations have created brand alignment concerns that we need to address responsibly. The foundation board members shift uncomfortably in their leather chairs. They recognize coded language when they hear it. Understand that brand alignment concerns means something personal is being disguised as policy. What kind of concerns? Asks Harold Webb, a 70-year-old shipping industry veteran who remembers when Lockwood money meant something different than strategic positioning. Reputation management, Thomas interjects smoothly, his lawyer voice turning threat into reasonable caution. When our family name appears alongside certain individuals at school events, donors ask questions, media outlets make connections that may not reflect our foundation's mission. It creates narrative risk. The hum of the buildings, climate control, fills the brief silence, expensive and invisible, maintaining perfect temperature while plans are made to freeze out inconvenient people. We're not suggesting permanent withdrawal, Sloane clarifies, which means they're absolutely suggesting exactly that. Just a pause. A temporary reassessment until circumstances stabilize and we can evaluate the partnership with fresh eyes. The phrase "until circumstances stabilize" translates clearly. Until Jordan Carter stops existing in spaces we want to control. Harold Webb clears his throat, the sound of someone who's been in enough boardrooms to recognize corporate speak masking personal vendetta. This wouldn't have anything to do with the boy at the fundraiser, would it? The one who bears a striking resemblance to your husband? The silence that follows could shatter the floor-to-ceiling windows. My husband's personal history isn't foundation business, Sloane replies, each word precise as a scalpel. Protecting our brand reputation is. This is about optics and donor confidence, not individuals. The vote passed 6-2. Franklin Elementary's STEM funding enters review status, effective immediately. The scholarships that sent 3 students to science camp last summer, the equipment grant that bought new microscopes, the teacher training program, all frozen pending further evaluation. The leak story resurfaces 3 days later, laundered through a business blog's retrospective analysis. The piece, titled "Loyalty in the Digital Age, When Trust Breaks Down," doesn't name Jordan directly. The author doesn't have to. Consider the early days of Cargo Stream. The article muses with false academic distance. Before the IPO, before the billions, there was a security breach. A girlfriend with system access. A competitor with timing too perfect to be coincidental. The official investigation never named a perpetrator. but industry insiders have long memories and longer shadow networks of information. The piece gets shared in Seattle tech circles, then picked up by a podcast about corporate espionage, then referenced in a local business news segment about startup security. Each iteration strips away more context, adds more insinuation, leaves more room for readers to draw their own damaging conclusions. At Jordan's workplace, the Department of Public Health, where she's worked for 11 years, building databases that track disease outbreaks and vaccination rates, colleagues who'd been supportive grow cautious, not hostile, just careful. The way people become around someone who might be radioactive, whose proximity might contaminate. Her supervisor, a generally reasonable woman named Dr. Patricia Vance, calls her in for a conversation that's framed as touching base but feels like investigation. "Of course your position is secure," Patricia says, the word of course doing heavy lifting, "but given some media attention, it might be wise to maintain a lower profile at public events for a while, just until things quiet down. You understand?" Jordan understands perfectly. She's being asked to make herself invisible so the department doesn't have to defend employing her. Orion comes home from school with questions that break her heart in their directness. Ryan's older brother said my mom was a criminal. What does industrial espionage mean? Jordan explains calmly, accurately, hating every word. "Some people think I did something bad a long time ago, stole information from a company. I didn't. But when you're connected to powerful people, others sometimes try to hurt you by telling lies. It's not true, but rumors spread anyway." "Is this about my dad?" "Yes. Some people who don't want your dad in your life are trying to make me look bad. They think if I look bad enough, maybe we'll go away and stop complicating things for them." "Are we going to go away?" "No, baby. We're not going anywhere. This is our home. These are our people. We don't run from lies. We just keep living our truth until the lies get bored and find someone else to bother." That night, after Orion falls asleep clutching his stuffed elephant, Jordan sits in her kitchen with the lights off. The city glows through the window, Seattle's skyline indifferent to personal crises unfolding in its modest apartments. She thinks about her mother's most recent voicemail. "You could still come home. Start fresh in Baltimore. I know people who could help you find work. Get away from all this mess." She thinks about the foundation meeting minutes that Gage forwarded. He'd voted against the funding freeze, been outvoted 6-2, and what it means that his family is weaponizing charity to punish an elementary school for her presence. She thinks about Orion's face when he asks about being a criminal, about the careful way he's started checking the car for photographers before getting in, about how he's begun asking if they can leave 10 minutes early to avoid the crowd at pickup. The consideration forms slowly, shameful and practical. Maybe strategic retreat is the right call. Not disappearing, not surrender, but calculated withdrawal. She could skip the next few school events, let the spotlight shift elsewhere. Stop attending PTA meetings where Sloan performs. Community engagement. Become less visible until the story loses its appeal to gossip blogs and social media speculation. Protect Orion from the noise by making herself smaller, quieter, less present in spaces where cameras might lurk. The thought tastes like failure, but it persists. She's survived worse situations by making herself less of a target. Maybe this is just another version of the same survival strategy that's kept them stable for 11 years. Her phone buzzes. Zuri. "Saw that garbage blog post. You holding up okay?" Jordan types back, considering becoming a hermit. "Viable career move? Terrible plan. Hermits have bad Wi-Fi and no one to bring them cinnamon bread. Come over for tea in the morning." The response makes her almost smile. Almost. The building's fire alarm tears through sleep at 2:47 a.m., that particular screech designed to make staying in bed biologically impossible. Jordan moves on autopilot, Grab Orion, grab phones, grab the emergency bag she's kept by the door since he was an infant. 11 years of single-mother preparedness compressed into 90-second response time. The hallway fills with neighbors in various states of undress and alertness. Mrs. Patterson from 2 Billions clutches her cat carrier. The college students from 4 look hungover and confused. Zuri appears from her door already wearing real shoes, because she's always prepared for everything. Outside, the November rain falls in sheets, the kind of Seattle rain that doesn't so much fall as occupy all available space simultaneously. The building's covered entrance provides minimal shelter. Residents cluster together under the overhang, sharing body heat and complaints about false alarms. The fire alarm's screech fades, replaced by the hush of rainfall, millions of drops creating white noise that swallows individual sounds, conversations happening in bubbles of relative quiet within the larger deluge. Orion shivers in his pajamas and jacket, too old to be carried but young enough that Jordan wraps her arm around him anyway. His teeth chatter. She pulls him closer, her own jacket already soaked through from the 30-second sprint from door to overhang. Then headlights cut through the darkness, a car pulling up faster than residential streets typically allow. Gage emerges from the driver's side, holding an umbrella large enough to shelter a small family and carrying an armful of towels. He stops at the edge of the covered area, rain streaming off the umbrella's canopy. "May I?" he asks, waiting for permission to approach rather than assuming access just because the situation is urgent. Jordan nods. The umbrella canopy creates a small dry world within the larger wet one. The towel that settles on Orion's shoulders is soft and warm. Gage must have heated them somehow, maybe thrown them in the dryer before leaving, thought ahead about what would help. "How did you know?" Jordan asks, accepting a second towel for herself. "I set an alert on the building's emergency services feed after you gave me your address," Gage admits. "Not tracking you, I know how that sounds, but I wanted to be able to help if something happened. Fire, medical emergency, whatever. Just to be useful if needed." 3 faces lit by the building's doorway lights, rain sliding off the umbrella's edge in silver streams. The towel bunched around Orion's shoulders, his father's hand steadying the umbrella pole, his mother's presence solid beside him. A strange tableau of family that doesn't quite fit traditional definitions, but exists nonetheless. The fire department arrives within 10 minutes, determines it's a false alarm. Someone's smoke detector triggered by burned popcorn on the 3rd floor. They clear residents to return to their apartments. The whole crisis lasts 40 minutes, start to finish. Gage doesn't try to come inside, doesn't use the moment to push boundaries or extract gratitude or leverage proximity into something more than it is. He walks them to the building entrance, hands Jordan a 3rd towel she hadn't noticed he was carrying, and says, "I'll check in tomorrow." "Unless you'd prefer I didn't." "Tomorrow's fine," she says. He nods, returns to his car, drives away into the rain without ceremony, without making the gesture bigger than it needs to be. The days that follow carry a strange quality of waiting, not for anything specific, but for whatever comes next. Sloane hasn't responded publicly to the paternity results. Gage hasn't confronted her yet, is building his legal strategy first. The media speculation continues at a low simmer. The Foundation's funding freeze stands. Jordan receives an email from Principal Fairchild. "Don't worry about the Lockwood funding. We're exploring other options and have several interested donors. More importantly, Orion's place here has nothing to do with anyone's money. He's a valued student, period. Small mercies that feel larger than they are." Thursday bench meetings continue. Gage reports that his lawyers are drafting separation documents that protect Aurora, regardless of paternity, ensuring she's provided for even though she's not biologically his. "She didn't choose any of this," he says. "She deserves stability." The sentiment shifts something in Jordan's perception of him. This willingness to accept responsibility even when legally freed from it, to choose care over revenge. Saturday visits continue unchanged. They visit the aquarium, where Orion explains octopus intelligence to Gage with the authority of someone who's read everything the library has on cephalopods. They're in the jellyfish exhibit, watching moon jellies pulse through dark water, when Orion asks, "Are you going to divorce her?" Gage doesn't insult him by pretending not to know who her is. Probably yes. The situation is complicated, but we can't stay married when the foundation isn't honest. Because of the baby. That's part of it. There are other reasons too, but none of them are about you. My relationship with you is separate from my marriage ending. Orion considers this watching jellies drift. My friend Tyler's parents got divorced. He said the worst part was everyone acting weird and not telling him what was happening. Then I'll tell you what's happening, as much as I can. And if you have questions, you can always ask. I might not have all the answers, but I won't lie to you. The promise hangs in the air like the jellies in water, delicate, transparent, real. If this kind of steady love matters to you, the kind that shows up with heated towels at 3 a.m., that asks permission instead of assuming rights, that builds trust in small moments rather than grand gestures, share this video with someone who needs the reminder. Because we could all use evidence that people can change, that broken things can mend differently than they were before, that fathers can learn fatherhood even when they missed the beginning. The rain continues outside the aquarium. Inside, a man and a boy watch jellies pulse through artificial currents, learning how to be father and son in the margins between one life ending and another beginning. Tomorrow will bring its own complications. Tonight is just jellyfish and questions answered honestly. The conversation happens in their home, the $17 million modernist structure overlooking Puget Sound that architectural magazines had featured as Seattle's most enviable family residence. Gage chooses the living room with its floor-to-ceiling windows, neutral, territory where neither of them holds particular advantage. He asks the household staff to leave for the evening. What comes next doesn't need witnesses. Sloane enters carrying Aurora, fresh from a board meeting where she'd successfully pushed through another initiative to streamline community partnerships, which everyone understood meant further isolating Jordan from institutional support. Her cream blazer matches the furniture perfectly. She's always been exceptional at looking like she belongs wherever she stands. "You wanted to talk?" She settles into the Barcelona chair, positioning Aurora on her lap like a shield, like insurance, like proof of claims she knows are about to be questioned. "I have conference calls in an hour. Cancel them." Something in his tone stops her automatic dismissal. She studies his face, recognizes the expression from boardroom negotiations when deals are already decided, and discussion is merely formality. "I had Aurora tested," Gage says simply, without preamble or cushioning. "She's not mine." The words land without drama, without accusation. Facts presented like quarterly earnings, unfortunate but undeniable, requiring response but not debate. Sloane's composure fractures for exactly 2 seconds before reassembling itself with visible effort. "That's absurd. The lab must have made an error. These tests aren't always—" 3 separate tests, 2 different facilities, 1 out of state. I had my own sample verified independently by a geneticist who specializes in paternity disputes. He pulls out documentation, the kind that courts find compelling, that lawyers can't dismiss. The results are conclusive. Probability of paternity, 0.0%. Aurora is not my biological daughter. Sloane adjusts Aurora's blanket, buying time to calculate responses, to sort through options that are narrowing by the second. Even if this were true, and I'm not admitting anything, paternity questions don't negate our marriage. You signed the birth certificate. California law would still recognize. I'm not interested in what California law recognizes as a technicality. Gage's voice remains level, almost gentle, which somehow makes it worse than anger would be. I'm interested in the truth. Something I should have prioritized 11 years ago with someone else, and I'm not making that mistake again. The reference to Jordan lands exactly where intended. Sloane's jaw tightens, her fingers pressing into Aurora's blanket hard enough that the baby fusses slightly. So what? You'll humiliate me publicly? Destroy Aurora's future to punish me for one mistake? Make me into some cautionary tale? No. Gage stands, moves to the window, back turned in a posture that would be dangerous with a different kind of adversary. I'm not weaponizing this. I'm not releasing statements or granting interviews or feeding information to gossip blogs. I'm just ending the pretense that we're something we're not. And what are we, according to you? Two people who made a strategic arrangement that served mutual purposes. Your family got access to tech industry legitimacy and my platforms. I got crisis management and social capital when I needed it. But we're not partners. We're not a family. We're a merger that's outlived its usefulness. The statement was released 48 hours later through standard PR channels. No press conference, no exclusive interview granted to sympathetic journalists, no strategic leak to friendly outlets. Just a single paragraph from Lockwood Communications. Gage Lockwood and Sloane Mercer Lockwood have mutually decided to separate. They request privacy during this transition and ask specifically that the media refrain from photographing any children connected to either family. No further statements will be made at this time. Please don't photograph children. 5 words that protect Orion, protect Aurora, protect whatever childhood dignity remains salvageable from adult failures. No blame assigned publicly, no insinuations about paternity fraud, no detailed autopsy of a marriage built on strategy rather than substance. The media speculates anyway, they always do, filling silence with theories, irreconcilable differences, competing career ambitions, the mysterious return of a former girlfriend with a son who looks remarkably like the husband. Blind items appear on gossip sites suggesting billionaire baby drama and secret paternity revelations. But without fuel, without confirmation, without dramatic counterstatements from either party feeding the cycle, the story burns through its initial heat within 2 weeks. New scandals emerge. Different billionaires have different crises. The news cycle moves on. Sloane's family lawyers send letters, thick packets threatening everything from defamation suits to custody battles. Thomas Mercer makes phone calls that Gage records and files without responding to, building documentation of harassment rather than engaging. Avery Klein negotiates terms that protect Lockwood business interests while ensuring Sloane walks away financially secure, if publicly diminished. The machinery that once targeted Jordan now grinds against itself, gears seizing without a common enemy to justify coordinated attack. What happens privately matters more than what appears in headlines or settlement documents. Gage establishes a trust for Aurora, not legally required given the paternity results that release him from all biological obligation, but ethically necessary in his reconstruction of who he wants to be. You don't have to do this, his attorney notes during settlement negotiations. DNA evidence releases you from financial responsibility. You could walk away completely clean. I'm not doing it because I have to. I'm doing it because she's an infant who didn't choose any of this. She lost the only father she knew. That's on the adults, not on her. She deserves stability regardless of biology. The trust ensures Aurora's education, healthcare, basic needs through age 25. Not Lockwood-level wealth, but security. Enough that she won't suffer materially for her mother's choices. He corrects records methodically, birth certificate amendments filed through proper legal channels, medical history updates, ensuring Aurora's actual genetic background is documented for health purposes. The paperwork of identity, handled with the same precision, he once applied to shipping algorithms. Sloan eventually reveals Aurora's biological father under legal pressure. A venture capitalist named Derek Hastings from her pre-Gage dating history, someone she'd maintained contact with as insurance against uncertain futures. That man will have to make his own choices about involvement. Gage's lawyers ensure he's notified, then step back. Not his circus anymore, not his monkeys. The story that never fit, perfect power couple, strategic union, complementary dynasties, finally stops being told. What replaces it is simpler, messier, more honest. Two people who made choices for wrong reasons are now making different choices for better ones. At Franklin Elementary, the school board convenes an emergency session regarding the Lockwood Foundation's funding freeze. Principal Fairchild presents enrollment data, test scores, the STEM program's demonstrable impact on student outcomes measured in concrete terms rather than donor satisfaction. Harold Webb, who'd voted against the freeze in the foundation meeting, attends as a private citizen, his presence lending weight to the proceedings. This school doesn't need Lockwood money to function, Ruth Fairchild states with the firmness of someone who's navigated worse budget crises. We've survived state funding cuts, federal, grant eliminations, economic downturns. We'll survive this. But we do need to discuss whether we want to be the kind of institution that changes educational courses whenever wealthy families have personal disputes. The board votes unanimously, reject conditional funding from any source that ties donations to personal considerations. If the Lockwood Foundation wants to support education, they can do so without strings attached to adult drama. Otherwise, the school will find other sources. 3 days later, an anonymous donation arrives through a complex trust structure. $200,000 designated for the library renovation project, no naming rights required, no publicity expected, no conditions attached beyond use it to benefit students. The school's accountant traces it through 3 shell companies to a trust administered by Gage Lockwood's personal attorney, the one handling his separation, not his corporate affairs. The library's empty shelves begin filling with new books, each spine a different color, a rainbow of possibilities built without anyone needing credit or recognition. Ruth Fairchild smiles when she sees the deposit confirmation. That man might actually be learning something. The winter assembly fills Franklin Elementary's gymnasium with folding chairs, overheated parents bundled in layers they're already regretting, and the particular controlled chaos of elementary school events. Orion sits in the front row with other award recipients, his good shirt tucked in for once, his hair combed into temporary submission that will last approximately 45 minutes. Jordan takes her usual seat 3 rows back, scanning the room for familiar faces. Zuri waves from the doorway. Principal Fairchild adjusting the microphone with the efficiency of someone who's done this 200 times. Various parents she recognizes from years of these gatherings, faces that have become familiar markers of community. In the very back, near the exit, a man in a baseball cap tries to be invisible. He's terrible at it. Height and posture betray him, and several parents have already noticed and are whispering. But the effort itself matters. Gage Lockwood, present without needing to be seen, watching without demanding attention. The contrast crystallizes visually. An empty seat in the front row where a father might traditionally sit versus those watchful eyes in the back, grateful just to witness, asking for nothing beyond the privilege of presence. This year's Design Thinking Award, Principal Fairchild announces, reading from notes, recognizes a student who demonstrates exceptional creativity in problem-solving, innovative approaches to challenges, and the ability to collaborate effectively with peers while maintaining individual vision. Jordan's hands tighten in her lap, hope and anxiety mixing. The recipient is Orion Carter, for his sustainable energy project that incorporated community feedback, iterative design improvements based on testing failures, and practical application of scientific principles to real-world problems affecting low-income housing. Applause rises like soft thunder, the particular warmth of a room full of people celebrating a child's achievement without complication or agenda. Just genuine appreciation for work done well. Orion walks to the stage with the careful dignity of 11-year-old formality, accepts his certificate from Principal Fairchild, and delivers the brief speech they'd practiced at the kitchen table. He thanks his teachers for letting him use the science lab after school. Thanks to his classmates who helped test prototypes and gave honest feedback even when it wasn't what he wanted to hear. Thanks his mother for driving him to the hardware store approximately 900 times and never complaining about glitter or baking soda explosions. Then he pauses, looks toward the back of the room, finds the baseball cap among the standing crowd. And thanks to my dad for showing me that it's never too late to learn how to show up. The gymnasium goes quiet for a beat, parents exchanging glances, some recognizing the loaded sentence for what it is, others simply confused. Then applause resumes, louder somehow, carrying something beyond simple congratulations. Recognition, maybe, that families come in complicated shapes, and what matters is effort, not perfection. After the ceremony, after photos and congratulations and Principal Fairchild's knowing smile, Orion goes home with Zuri for celebratory ice cream, triple chocolate, his choice, earned. Jordan and Gage find themselves in the emptying gymnasium, helping parent volunteers fold chairs and stack tables. The parallel callback to the spaghetti dinner happens naturally, both of them gravitating toward the cleanup without discussion, working side by side with synchronized rhythm that comes from weeks of Saturday afternoons learning each other's patterns. "I'm sorry," Gage says, collapsing a chair with practiced efficiency he didn't have 3 months ago. Not generically sorry, specifically sorry for specific failures. Jordan waits, hands full of metal folding chair legs, letting him work through it. "I'm sorry I believed them over you without evidence, without even asking your side. I'm sorry I changed my number instead of having a conversation like an adult. I'm sorry I let other people's suspicions become my truth without verification." He pauses, stacks another chair. "I'm sorry I missed his first words, first steps, first day of school, first 1,000 things. I'm sorry you had to explain why he didn't have a father when that was my failure, not yours. I'm sorry I made you navigate 11 years alone because I was too controlled by fear to question the narrative. People fed me. The specificity matters. Not blanket apology designed to resolve discomfort, not excuse-laden regret, but itemized acknowledgement of harm caused. Each sorry attached to concrete action or inaction. "What are you going to do differently?" Jordan asks. The question that separates genuine change from performance, transformation from temporary adjustment. Keep showing up, keep asking permission instead of assuming access, keep being the back row parent until Orion decides I've earned front row proximity. He meets her eyes. Keep choosing truth over comfort, even when comfort is easier. Keep being accountable to you about how my actions affect him, especially when it's uncomfortable or inconvenient. Keep learning that love is behavior demonstrated over time, not feelings declared once. Actionable change. Measurable commitments. The language of someone who's finally learned that intention without action is just noise. They finish the chairs in companionable silence, the gymnasium lights dimming as custodians begin their evening routines. In the hallway by the door that leads to the parking lot, they stop, facing each other in the transitional space between school and the outside world. "Can I walk you to your car?" Gage asks. "You may." The December evening wraps around them, cold enough for visible breath. The sky clear for once and scattered with early stars. Their cars sit adjacent in the mostly empty lot. Coincidence of parallel parking that feels like something more. Gage turns to face her fully. I don't expect anything. I need to be clear about that. Whatever we rebuild, if we rebuild anything beyond co-parenting, starts from where Orion's needs are met, not from where my wants live. I know. Jordan studies him in the parking lot light, this man she loved at 22, resented for 11 years, and is now learning to see clearly without the distortion of either idealization or anger. But for the record, where do your wants live? Here, simple, honest, terrifying in its directness. With both of you, in whatever form you'll allow, at whatever pace makes sense. I want to build something real this time, not strategic. But only if you want that too. A heartbeat rhythm underlays the moment. Quick, nervous, human. Visible breath in cold air. The particular silence of a parking lot after dark, distant traffic on the highway. She steps closer. May I? He nods, understanding that she's asking permission the way he's learned to ask, that consent matters in small moments as much as large ones, that reciprocity and respect is how trust gets built. The kiss is brief, a beginning, not a finale. Lips meeting and parting without pressure, without demands, without promises beyond this single moment of choosing closeness after years of enforced distance. It tastes like possibility and caution mixed together, like something fragile that might become strong if handled carefully. That's not a decision, Jordan clarifies afterward, creating necessary boundaries even in the middle of vulnerability. That's a question. About whether we can figure out how to be something that doesn't hurt this time. I'd like to try answering that question. Slowly. With you leading the pace, then we start slow. Slower than slow. We've already been slow, he points out, a ghost of his old humor surfacing. 11 years of prologue. 12 if you count the year before. She almost laughs. Almost. Fair point. But this is different. Intentionally slow. Choosing slow because it's right, not because circumstances force it. 2 figures in a parking lot. Breath visible in cold air. The school's windows dark behind them, except for one custodian's flashlight moving through empty halls. They part for separate cars, separate homes, separate lives that might someday converge into something shared. But not yet. Not tonight. Tonight is just a kiss in a parking lot, a question asked but not yet answered, the first brick in a bridge they're only beginning to design together. 6 months later, the apartment in Columbia City looks different. Not transformed. Jordan would never allow some makeover that erased their history, that suggested what they had before needed replacing. But evolved, grown into a slightly different shape. The kitchen table that seated 2 now holds 3 chairs. The newest one came from a thrift store, found on a Saturday morning trip, where Orion insisted on choosing it himself, because it has character. Mom, look at the carving on the back. The carving turns out to be someone's initials from 1987, a small piece of someone else's history joining theirs. The third chair's leg wobbles slightly. Gage offered to buy a new set, something matching, sturdy, from one of those furniture stores where everything costs more than it should. Jordan declined. We fix what we have before replacing it with something shinier, she explained, and the lesson extended beyond furniture. So now there's a small wooden shim under that leg, cut from a paint stirrer, a tiny repair that holds weight just fine. The table surface shows its years, scratches from homework mishaps, a water ring from the time Orion forgot a glass overnight, a small burn mark from when Jordan set down a too-hot pot. The slow pan across its surface reveals accumulated life, mismatched chairs arranged around scarred wood, evidence of meals shared, homework completed, conversations had about everything from solar system formation to why people make choices that hurt each other. The wobbling leg visible, the shim beneath it even more so. Nothing hidden, nothing pretending to be other than what it is. The refrigerator door serves as gallery space, same as always. Orion's construction paper, solar system, still dominates the upper half. Planets rendered in crayon and glitter with scientific accuracy in proportion if not materials. Saturn's rings still drip with gold sparkles. Earth still shows a tiny dot, labeled us with an arrow pointing to the Pacific Northwest. New additions have joined it. A photo from the aquarium, Orion, and Gage in front of the octopus exhibit, both making the same thoughtful expression without realizing it. A postcard from Aurora, or rather, from Sloane on Aurora's behalf. A peace offering of sorts, acknowledging that the baby has a half-brother she might someday know. A drawing Orion made titled My Family that includes stick figures for Mom, Dad, Zuri, and a remarkably detailed rendering of his stuffed elephant. Beneath the gallery hangs the calendar, that universal organizing principle of shared custody and coordinated lives. Color-coded blocks mark the rhythm they've developed. Blue for primary custody days with Mom, green for weekends with Dad, purple for school events where both attend, orange for the occasional Wednesday dinner where all three eat together. The visual representation of a family reconfigured. Not broken, not blended in the traditional sense, but redesigned according to principles of what actually works rather than what looks conventional. Today's square shows purple, Spring Science Fair. The knock comes at 4 p.m., the specific rhythm that identifies Zuri before the door opens. 3 quick raps, pause, 1 more. She enters carrying a foil-wrapped loaf, its cinnamon smell announcing itself before she crosses the threshold. Pre-event fortification, she declares, setting it on the counter with the authority of someone whose kitchen contributions have become ritual. Can't have anyone's blood sugar crashing during presentations. Orion emerges from his room, hair sticking up from concentrating too hard on his display boards, index cards clutched in one hand. Miss Zuri, did you use the recipe with the cream cheese frosting this time? They slice into the bread while Orion reviews his talking points. His project this year examines energy efficiency in older apartment buildings. Inspired, he told his teacher, by watching his mom calculate utility bills and his dad explain building thermal dynamics. The practical application of science to real problems, combining both parents' influences. Laughter fills the kitchen, Orion's giggle mixing with Zuri's warm chuckle and Jordan's quieter smile sounds. The particular music of repair, of community reconstructed around a table with mismatched chairs and a wobbling leg that holds just fine. Your father picking you both up? Zuri asks. The question natural now where once it would have been impossible, where for 11 years the word father meant only absence. 6 o'clock. He's bringing his colleague who works in sustainable architecture. She wanted to see my thermal imaging data. A man who thinks about educational networking, Zuri observes, cutting another slice. Progress continues. Jordan snorts softly. Don't canonize him yet. He still leaves cabinet doors open like he was raised without basic spatial awareness. Nobody's perfect, but some people learn. Some people keep trying even when it's hard. The simple observation hangs in the air, true in ways that extend far beyond cabinet doors and bread sharing and coordinated calendars. The science fair goes well. Orion's presentation earns first place and genuine interest from a university sustainability program looking for youth ambassadors. Gage asks thoughtful questions about methodology, while Jordan documents the moment on her phone, both of them standing on opposite sides of the display booth in the arrangement they've developed, letting Orion occupy the center, literally and figuratively. Afterward, riding the energy of success and springtime temperatures that finally feel warm, Orion requests a detour, the small waterfront park, where you can see stars despite city lights, where they've started going as a tradition after good things happen. Please? Just for a little bit? The planetarium app says Orion should be really visible tonight. They walk 3 abreast, Orion in the middle, the position he's claimed as his, equidistant from both parents. The May evening carries the scent of salt water and blooming things, Seattle finally shaking off winter's grey compression. Orion knows his constellations with the expertise of someone named for one, someone who's spent years studying the sky as connection to his own identity. He points upward, finger-tracing patterns invisible to untrained eyes. There's Orion. See the belt? 3 stars in a row. Alnitak, Alnilam, Mintaka. And Betelgeuse up there on the shoulder, the red supergiant. It's actually dying, has been for thousands of years, but it's so far away we still see it as it was, not as it is now. That's beautiful, Gage says quietly, understanding that his son is talking about more than astronomy. Also, the sword hangs down from the belt, and right in the middle is the Orion Nebula, where new stars are being born. So it's like death and birth in the same constellation. Mom told me I was named after the hunter because hunters are brave and patient and know how to find their way by stars. That's exactly right, Jordan confirms. Also because I was born during the Orionid meteor shower, Orion adds with characteristic precision. October 21st. The meteors come from Halley's comet debris, particles burning up in the atmosphere. Science and mythology together. He stops walking, still looking up, and his hands reach out, finding Gage's jacket on one side, Jordan's sweater on the other. Not quite holding hands, but making contact, creating connection. A star chart overlay could map the constellation lines, connecting actual stars to their mythological patterns, the hunter Orion rendered in light and legend. But to the 3 people standing on a waterfront path, it's just sky. Just stars that have always been there, that will remain long after they're gone, constant and knowable. That one is ours, Orion says, pointing at his namesake constellation. Wherever any of us are, we can always see the same stars. So we're never really apart, not completely. The observation, profound and simple, in the way only children manage, settles over all 3 of them. Above, Betelgeuse pulses its ancient red light, a supergiant that's been dying for longer than human civilization has existed, yet remains visible, constant, there. So what do we take from this story? What truths emerge from the complicated mess of human choices, from love and loss and learning, from mistakes made and slowly corrected? Tell the truth even when it costs. Gage could have weaponized his discovery about Aurora, orchestrated public humiliation that would have destroyed Sloane while making himself look like a victim. Instead, he chose private accountability over public revenge. The truth mattered more than winning, more than looking right, more than strategic advantage. Jordan could have forced her way into Gage's life 11 years ago with paternity suits and press conferences, and all the weapons available to someone wronged. Instead, she chose to build a life that didn't depend on proving anything to anyone, that stood on its own merit rather than someone else's acknowledgement. Truth costs, truth disrupts. Truth requires walking away from comfortable lies that serve short-term interests. But truth is the only foundation that holds weight over time, the only ground stable enough to build lasting structures. Wealth can gloss a life, it can't make it good. The Lockwood fortune bought beautiful homes, strategic marriages, crisis management teams, and the ability to make problems disappear temporarily. But money couldn't manufacture the connection Gage craved with his actual son. Money couldn't replace years of first words and loose teeth and bedtime stories, couldn't purchase the trust that comes only from consistent presence. Meanwhile, in a walk-up apartment with a wobbly table leg, Jordan and Orion built something money couldn't buy. A life that fit them. Not perfect, not easy, but real. When Gage finally entered that life, he entered as a guest, earning his place through presence rather than purchasing it with resources. Boundaries protect love. Every limit Jordan set. Child-first pacing, documented agreements, neutral meeting spaces. No cameras, no expensive gifts without approval. Created space for genuine relationships to develop. Without those boundaries, Gage's resources and desperation could have overwhelmed Orion, transforming him from a person to be known into a prize to be won. Boundaries aren't walls built from fear or punishment. They're gardens built from love, protecting what's growing until it's strong enough to withstand storms without breaking. Children first, in practice, not performance. Not children first as a slogan or PR strategy or something you say in interviews. Children first in actual decisions, skipping events that would be overwhelming, sitting in back rows to avoid unwanted attention, accepting slow timelines even when adult impatience demands faster progress, choosing boring consistency over exciting gestures. Orion's well-being was never negotiable. His stability was never something to be sacrificed for adult reconciliation or romantic reunion. Every decision, from custody arrangements to public statements to how fast the relationship between his parents developed, ran through the filter of what does this mean for the 11-year-old trying to understand his suddenly complicated family. Community and small acts stitch a life back together. Zuri's cinnamon bread, Principal Fairchild's protection of the school as a safe space, Harold Webb's dissenting vote, the anonymous library donation. The neighbors who watched Orion grow, the teachers who nurtured his curiosity, the friends who showed up when headlines made everything harder. No one rebuilt this family alone. The small acts, chair stacking, bread baking, permission asking, showing up on time, heated towels at 3 a.m., accumulated into something larger than any grand gesture could achieve. A sticky note appears, handwriting careful and clear, the kind of reminder that matters more than inspirational posters. Stack chairs. Tell the truth. Show up. If this story moved you, if you found yourself rooting for Orion, hoping Gage would learn, believing Jordan deserved peace, recognizing pieces of your own complicated family in theirs, then you understand why we tell these stories. Subscribe to Mr. Steele Rich Stories for weekly, life-changing American narratives. Every story we share examines what happens when ordinary people face extraordinary choices, when wealth meets values, when the easy path and the right path diverge, and someone has to choose which one to walk. Drop a comment below with your biggest takeaway. What lesson are you carrying into your week? Is it the importance of truth-telling even when it costs? The power of boundaries to protect rather than punish? The courage of showing up consistently when you've previously failed? We read every comment, and your insights genuinely shape the stories we choose to tell. Share this video with someone who needs hope and a blueprint for repair. Maybe they're navigating complicated family dynamics. Maybe they're learning to trust again after betrayal. Maybe they just need to know that broken things can mend, slowly and imperfectly, into something new that works differently but works nonetheless. And if you're hungry for more, next week brings a story that asks a different question about integrity. A night shift janitor working in a corporate high-rise finds a wallet containing $20,000 in cash left in an executive bathroom. The owner won't know it's missing until morning. No security cameras in that hallway. No one's watching. What happens when someone chooses integrity when it's costly, inconvenient, and no one would ever know the difference? That story drops next Thursday. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss it.